Good afternoon. This is Shelley Feist. I'm the Executive Director of the Partnership for Food Safety Education. Very excited to have so many joining us today on what is a really important topic that I think all of us can learn a lot from about our work with consumers in food safety education. I welcome you all to our Knowledge Exchange, Clostridium perfringens, Anatomy of an Outbreak. Our guest today is Susan Farley. She's Nurse Program Manager of the Disease Investigation and Control Program at Contra Costa County Public Health. And during the Q&A session, we're fortunate that we will be joined by Marilyn Underwood, who is Environmental Health Director at Contra Costa County. Both Susan and Marilyn were investigators of a devastating foodborne illness outbreak in Antioch, California, that followed a Thanksgiving 2016 holiday meal offered by local church volunteers. The example Susan's going to talk about is a powerful case for the importance of food safety outreach and education at the community level. Anyone can get sick from a foodborne illness, and some people can get very sick. Knowledge of how to handle food safely and putting that knowledge into consistent action can lower the risk of this kind of outbreak. Before we get started, I'd like to review some of what we know about this nasty pathogen. Clostridium perfringens is one of the most common types of foodborne illness in the United States. The CDC estimates that it causes nearly 1 million cases of foodborne illness each year. Common food sources of C. perfringens are beef, poultry, gravies, and dried or pre-cooked foods. C. perfringens infection often occurs when foods are prepared in large quantity and then kept warm for a long time before they're served. Outbreaks often happen in institutions such as hospitals, school cafeterias, prisons, and nursing homes, or at events with catered food. And although C. perfringens is found normally in the human intestine, illness is caused by eating food contaminated with large numbers of the bacteria that produce enough toxin in the intestines to cause illness. C. perfringens can survive high temperatures, so during cooling and holding of food at temperatures from 54 degrees Fahrenheit to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, the bacteria grows. It can grow very rapidly between 109 degrees Fahrenheit and 117 Fahrenheit. So if food is served without reheating to kill the bacteria, live bacteria may be consumed. The bacteria produce a toxin inside the intestine, as we discussed, that causes the illness. The symptoms of C. perfringens food poisoning are diarrhea and abdominal cramps within 6 to 24 hours, typically 8 to 12 hours. The illness usually begins suddenly and lasts for less than 24 hours. People infected with C. perfringens usually do not experience fever or vomiting. Well, everyone is susceptible to food poisoning from C. perfringens. The very young and elderly are most at risk and can experience more severe symptoms that may last for 1 to 2 weeks. Complications from a serious illness can include dehydration, and death may occur in severe cases. Today you're going to hear about such severe cases from Susan Farley. So Susan, would you be willing to start by giving us an overview of the investigation procedures that were used at Contra Costa County Public Health in this case?
Sure. A communicable disease outbreak investigation at Contra Costa Public Health usually involves getting reports of illnesses, some of which can be foodborne, and confirming these cases, gathering additional information by interviewing the ill and sometimes persons at risk who did not become sick, reviewing and synthesizing the initial information and forming hypotheses, performing follow-up activities based upon these hypotheses, which may include collecting additional specimens and samples, accompanying our Environmental Health Division staff on site visits where suspected foods were produced, processed, or prepared to determine potential and additional sources of contamination, survival, or growth of the causative agent.
Thank you, Susan. Can you please talk us through the basics of what happened in this investigation related to the Thanksgiving outbreak? as I read about it, I was surprised at the speed at which everyone seemed to jump into action on the investigation.
It was a team effort with many people working to gather as much information as quickly as possible. Most of the investigation was completed within the week following the event. We wanted to make sure the community at large was not at risk, and we wanted to interview people before their memories began to fade. This was a tragic event for our community. Several community members became seriously ill, and 3 community members died. So by sharing this experience with your audience today, we hope that tragedies such as this one can be prevented. Over the 2016 Thanksgiving holiday weekend, the county health officer on call was notified by a local hospital that it had seen 8 community members from a congregate living facility with nausea and vomiting and or diarrhea. 1 passed away and several were critically ill. Later, hospital staff updated our health officer with information that all 8 had attended a Thanksgiving community event at the American Legion Hall. Although it was helpful that the hospital shared the community food event with us, we also had to consider that people living in the same household may have many common exposures, not just the Thanksgiving event noted by the hospital. For example, norovirus illness can cause nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea and can be common during that time of year, especially in congregate living facilities. So we recommended that the congregate living facility clean all surfaces and items and also monitor residents for illness. And we asked the hospital to include norovirus testing for the patients in their care.
Okay, what happened next?
Well, over the next few days, with the help of our public health lab and environmental health division, we collected more information through interviews, inspections, and laboratory tests. We wanted to know if others had become ill. Public health and environmental health staff visited the 3 congregate living facilities where the initial 8 persons resided to interview residents and staff. We notified our local hospitals and asked them to be on the lookout for ill people who had eaten at the same event. And during a press conference, we asked ill community members to see their doctor.
How did you begin then to focus more specifically? What was the movement to get to a focus on this Thanksgiving meal event?
Environmental health staff visited the American Legion Hall where the event was held. This facility is frequently used as a soup kitchen throughout the year. Environmental health staff found out that the soup kitchen did not provide the food on Thanksgiving. Instead, a local community church had rented the facility for the Thanksgiving event. After speaking with church staff, environmental health learned mashed potatoes made from dry mix and stovetop stuffing was made at the American Legion Hall. Canned green beans and corn were warmed up there. And everything else, including turkey, came from the homes of volunteers. We also identified a few outliers, and they helped support the theory that the Thanksgiving event food was the cause of the illness. The 8 ill lived in one of 3 facilities, but household members who did not attend the event were not ill. There were 2 other people who became ill but did not attend the event. They were family members of a congregate living facility employee who had brought home leftovers from the Thanksgiving event. And we also learned of a resident of a completely different congregate living facility who had no interaction with the first 8, but had attended the Thanksgiving event and became ill. So these findings pointed to one common thread, eating the food from the Thanksgiving event.
And how did your investigation begin to hone in on C. perfringens?
To determine which infectious agents could have been responsible, we reviewed onset dates, symptoms, illness duration, food histories. We consulted with experts at the state health department, and noting the lack of secondary transmission made norovirus less likely. And looking at all the information at hand, we began to suspect a toxin as the culprit, perhaps from Bacillus cereus or Clostridium perfringens. Our public health lab ran tests to rule out over 20 common foodborne agents, including E. coli, salmonella, norovirus, and all of these tests came back negative. C. perfringens testing is not commonly done, so specimens were sent out to the Centers for Disease Control. And we were told that the results could take several weeks.
Okay, so about a week following the Thanksgiving event, what were you learning about the extent of the outbreak?
Early on, we were very concerned about ongoing transmission and a threat to the community's health. Environmental Health had learned that the event had served over 800 meals, but we only identified about 20 who became ill after consuming food from the event. Symptoms began within 1 to 2 days after consuming the food, and most people felt better in a few days. Unfortunately, 3 of those 20 did not survive, and that was deeply saddening, especially during the holiday season. Dr. Underwood and our communicable disease medical director, Dr. Louisa McNitt, held 2 joint press conferences the week after Thanksgiving and multiple interviews with the media. These press conferences helped keep the community updated, instructed the community to throw away any leftovers, and to see their doctors if they were ill. We were also able to reassure the community that there was no ongoing risk to public health.
Of the health department staff, one health department staff member working on this, Dr. Underwood, did a comprehensive interview with many of the volunteers involved who had put on the dinner. She reported what she found were the food safety issues. Can you tell us more of what she learned from the volunteers about food safety issues?
Dr. Underwood interviewed the church pastor, site directors, table service volunteers, and others. The church has been offering a free Thanksgiving meal for 30 years, and they were very upset by what had happened. And what she discovered was all volunteers who handle food, including table service, the chafing dishes, the pie table, and working in the kitchen, wear disposable gloves. However, no hand washing was required before donning the gloves. No temperatures were taken. Food was kept hot once received, or it was cooked on the spot as needed. No permits were obtained. She identified the most critical contributing factor, and that was that an approved food source was not used. So
during this time, the CDC was doing lab work to identify the pathogen. What did the CDC C. perfringens lab results show?
Well, most of the investigative work was done in late November, and at that point we were fairly confident, based on all of the other information, that we had identified the causative agent. In early December, the CDC provided us with preliminary lab results. The foodborne illness outbreak was caused by the bacteria Clostridium perfringens type A. And by late December, CDC confirmed the presence of the Clostridium perfringens type A in stool samples that were taken from people sickened by food served at the November 24th holiday celebration. We issued a media advisory at that time to announce the final lab results and also to encourage community members planning a charity food event to contact Environmental Health. Charity food events are important community resources, and Environmental Health wants to help these event organizers understand the permitting process and how to handle food safely.
Thank you, Susan, for this recap. Can you sum up the impact of the event on the people who became ill?
Sure. The Public Health and Environmental Health Divisions investigated 25 reported illnesses from this event. 22 persons were interviewed. 6 persons had to be taken to the emergency room. There were 3 deaths. All of those were among middle-aged adults. There was 1 person admitted to the hospital who did survive. Our investigation was not able to determine exactly what people ate that made them sick, but after extensive interviews, we found most of the ill persons ate turkey and mashed potatoes, and they all ate around the same time on the day of the event. I think an important message to leave with this audience is that anyone can get sick from a foodborne illness, and some people can get very sick and even die. Consistent, safe food handling practices are very important, whether you're preparing a meal for yourself, your family, or for a large group.
Thank you so much, Susan. We really appreciate your willing to share this experience with BAC fighters on the phone, many of whom may work in public health, but all of whom in some way contribute to educating others about food safety. So thank you. We're going to move into the questions section now. What this means is that if you want to ask a question, you should press *6, and then you'll be asked to press 1 to get into the question queue. If you want to get out of the queue, you can press #2 to get out. But you'll get in the queue, and then I will call on people using a portion of your phone number. Since I do not have people's names, I will read off the first 6 digits of your phone number. So that's how you'll know I'm calling on you. So we'll get started. Oh, we don't have any email questions, which I found surprising. Remember to press *6. And remember that Dr. Underwood will also be joining us for the question portion. Please make your question relevant to this topic we're covering today. If it's not relevant, we will just move forward, and I will get back to you about your question. But we are asking that your questions be on this case that happened in Contra Costa County. So please enter *6 to ask a question live. Okay. The Q&A session started. Again, enter *6. This is, I know, a topic of great interest to people. We had a lot of folks registered for the event, and I'm sure there are questions, and there's probably also people have experiences they want to share about similar situations where they live. It's a very important topic, this issue of large community events. The first person I'm going to call on is at 925-261. I'm calling on you to ask your question. Please give your name and your organization, and keep your question short.
Yes, my name is Ann Tiscarino. I'm a dietitian. I happen to be in the county that is involved. I belong to a church, and we help feed the homeless at a large homeless shelter. Does our church need to get a food permit?
Hi there. It could be that you would need to get a permit. This is Dr. Marilyn Underwood. And probably be best if, certainly if you are preparing the food at that facility, that's best, and that facility be permitted by us. If it's a permitted facility and you're preparing the food there, you wouldn't necessarily have to get an additional permit, your organization. You would be depending on the permit for that particular facility. The unusual thing, like at this Thanksgiving event, is the facility was permitted for the soup kitchen, but not in this case for the church. So in that case, they should have gotten what we call a temporary food permit. But if you call our offices, I'd be happy to have our staff walk you through it so that we can again get you guys set up to be doing it the right way.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
Sure.
you so much.
Thanks.
All right. I'm calling on, we have a caller here from Kansas State University. I'm not seeing your phone number, but I would like to call on you. So if you're with Kansas State University, I see it's 913-307. Please ask your question and give us your name if you would.
Yes, my name is Landon Watson, and I'm the State Extension Food Safety Specialist for Kansas and Missouri. And thank you for your presentation. I apologize, I might have missed some of it as I had something else for a minute. But can you give kind of some of the, just what are the key things that you think people that are doing this sort of volunteer quantity cooking, what are some of those key messages that we should share with them? Like what are kind of your top 3 or top 5 messages that you think we should share?
Well, I think definitely anytime you're preparing what we call potentially hazardous food, it should be done, again, in a permitted facility versus in the home. Because, again, I think probably what happened is, my suspicion is that there was somebody cooked, so these turkeys were each cooked at home. There were 30 turkeys cooked by, we think, 30 different families that volunteered. And what happens in that case is that after the turkey was cooked, the question is whether or not there was enough room. We all know how filled our refrigerators get when we're just preparing our own Thanksgiving meal, and now there's an additional turkey. My suspicion is that it was not adequately cooled, had set out on the counter somewhere, or even left in the oven perhaps. And that was a perfect time for this bacteria to grow in the turkey. And again, and the reason why is that size kitchen isn't, the right place to prepare something for a large group of people. And I think that's what happens when you have at least a legitimate permitted facility. It's got the right space and equipment to take on a lot of that large food handling. I do think, other than that, I do think this meal was run very successfully for 30 years, obviously. This was the first time we had heard of them having some sort of illness associated with it, obviously very tragic. So they did a lot of good, and I think they did a lot of good food safety, including using gloves. We would, of course, prefer that they also wash their hands thoroughly before donning the gloves. And handling the food in the kitchen once it was received was done fairly well. Again, I think the biggest concern is that there was food cooked in the homes and probably not adequate cooling of the turkey. Mm-hmm. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your question and for being with us. Okay, we have a caller at area code 320-203. Please give us your name. I'm calling on you now to ask your question.
Hi, this is Suzanne Dreesen from the University of Minnesota Extension. And in Minnesota, we have a church lady law, so people doing functions like this at a church or other organizations do not need to get a permit, but it is required that they do have training. At least one person needs to be trained, and then they're supposed to train their volunteers. So my question is related to training. After this event, did you do any training for organizations, or is that a requirement?
Hi there. Thanks very much for commenting on what you guys do in Minnesota. And we actually would have been okay with the church using their own facility. They have a very nice kitchen at their facility and cooking there and using volunteers, and conducting this training as you're referring to. Unfortunately, that's not, at least here, we wouldn't allow food being cooked at home by volunteers. So as far as training, what we are doing, have already done, is we've done a lot of outreach to our 21 chambers of commerce, get the information out again that we're here to help them if there know of their members of their organization that are going to be doing events such as this, that we're here to help them walk through the process and make sure they do it correctly, including, as you're talking about, getting them to do food safety handler classes for their volunteers. We are also reached out to our 19 cities, and the next thing we're going to be doing is reaching out to what we call our event halls, and these are things like American Legion halls, our churches, but also some of our civic buildings that can be rented out, and making sure that everybody knows that they need to come to environmental health, and then we'll step them through the process so that it can be done safely and continue to have these great events happen, just in a manner that's we hope that will not result in anybody getting sick.
Suzanne, thank you for your question and for being with us.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm showing someone who's just wireless caller, but you're at 814-441. Do you have a question for Suzanne or Marilyn?
Hi, Suzanne. This is Huda. I'm from Ball State University, EDD student, and I would like to know, since we don't know, we can't tell if the food it's been poisoning or unsafe to eat from smelling or seeing the food. How we can make sure that the food and potluck that the people bring is safe to consume?
I'm sorry, I might not have missed how you said something about how do we know if the food is safe that people bring?
Yes.
Are you saying bring to a
potluck, monthly dinner? We usually have monthly dinner with the whole community. We have interfaith dinner, sometime with other church, with the school around us, and the university, sometime in the class. So how we make sure? Sometimes I really don't want to eat any other people's food that I don't know, but really shame, and especially in my community. I'm from Saudi Arabia, and they encourage us to test their food. But I don't know, how can I make sure that their food is safe to consume?
Well, I don't know that you can really make sure it is. I do know that we have the church had asked us to develop a handout, if you will, that they could provide to their members for things similar to what you're talking about, not serving the public, but these events that they hold all the time at the church, where church members come, as you say, to a weekly breakfast or potlucks. And so we did develop a sort of just a kind of a common sense approach to how you can produce food safely in your home for them to use. And I'd be happy to share that if you'd like. But I don't know that there's any guarantee that people really follow those. But I do think that one of the things you point out is that whenever you're preparing food in your home, you want to be able to prepare the amount of food that you can safely prepare. And when you're preparing something for a whole lot more people than your kitchen is meant for, that's when you can probably get in trouble of producing something that may not be as safely done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
A reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, to please raise your hand, *6. We do have another 5 minutes or so for questions, so please raise your hand, *6, if you have a question about this case and about how it might have implications for your work. I'm going to call on someone at phone number 434-972. Please give us your name and ask your question.
Yes, my name is Elizabeth Campbell. I'm from Central Virginia with the Virginia Department of Health, one of the local health districts. I'm the technical consultant for the district, and I've been in the field for over 30 years in environmental health. And I have seen a recent sort of resurgence, if you will, of Clostridium perfringens. There was a long time we didn't see much because it's typically pretty gross temperature abuse in large volumes of food. And typically it's usually been associated with some kind of beef product. So it's sort of surprising that it sort of branched out into turkey. But, yeah, the cooling of large volumes is always a challenge. In Virginia, we have an exemption to our regulations for churches and religious organizations in terms of temporary events as well as cooking regularly. And we also, just as an FYI, we try to do what we call Cooking for Crowds, which is a standard class that's been developed by many of the extension services around the country or the state universities that are associated with extension. And I do know the other point I wanted to make is there are some online classes that are short designed really for Cooking for Crowds and people who do temporary food service, usually charitable groups. But you may want to try to find those links through some of the extension offices and put them on your website, because I think that's a really good way for a lot of people to learn.
Thank you. Can I have your name again?
Elizabeth Campbell.
Elizabeth Campbell, thank you. Did you have a question? I appreciate these thoughts, and one of the things I wanted to tell folks we're going to do is send out a follow-up, and I'm going to link to some of these important resources. IAFP also has a very good guide to community events, and so I'll look for some of these.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. You're
welcome.
Elizabeth.
Thank you. If you.
Oh, I think I muted her. All right. I have someone here from South Carolina at 803-734. Please, you're open to ask your question. Give us your name.
Hi, my name's Katherine Schaefer, and I'm with the Lieutenant Governor's Office on Aging. And really, I just wanted to point out that there was a Cooking for Groups, a volunteer guide to food safety on the web, which is easy to find. It is a 2001 document, though. I didn't actually have a question. I just wanted to share that.
Okay. Yeah, there isn't anything particularly recent. Probably the fundamentals haven't changed, but I know at IAFP, I was there actually for the food safety education group, and we talked about an update of their publication. So thanks for pointing that out and for being with us, Office on Aging. We'd love to have you here because we have a lot of challenges to address that audience, so thank you. All right. Let's see. I think we can go a couple more minutes if Susan and Marilyn, if you're up for it.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate your time. I'm calling on area code 715-485. You are open to ask your question. Please give us your name.
My name is Gail, and I work for Extension, and I was wondering the common procedures for volunteer groups, is that going to be one of the sites or one of the resources that you provide in the feedback?
Common procedures for volunteer groups.
Yeah, you mentioned that you do have a handout that you give like to church groups. No guarantee, but just some common sense for food handling.
Well, there are a couple publications that address this, that address food handling by volunteers. Susan and Marilyn, did you have anything to add about this idea of common procedures?
Well, I was just going to add the handout we were providing to them was for something that they could just use for their own kind of member events, like their monthly get-togethers and weekly things. Then as far as we here in California have something called a food safety handler card that is required of folks that work in restaurants. They have to have one person that has the more extensive food safety certification, but all people that are called food employees need to have this, and you can take it online, usually about a 2-hour class. The church in this case is now having all of their staff that do public events get that food handler certification. Would I suggest that to others? Certainly, that come to, as we do outreach, but it's not necessarily required for them. But I do think it's a very good course and would teach folks how to, better prepare and handle the food.
Hi. Thank you. Thanks for the question. All right, this will be our last question, and then let me say that, again, in the follow-up, we will point you to where to find the recording of this call, and I will close the call with some final comments, but we'll take one more question. I'm going to call on someone at area code 717-514.
Yes, hi. My name's Tim McGrath. I'm a culinary arts instructor at a local vocational technical school, and I teach food safety as well. Would you say, again, what the temperature danger zone or where the most growth occurs for Clostridium perfringens?
Yeah, so that's on my comments, and then if Dr. Underwood has any further comments, what we said in the opening comments was that the area of between 54 degrees Fahrenheit and 140 was an area for growth of bacteria, but the rapid growth between 109 Fahrenheit and 117 Fahrenheit.
Okay.
Thank you for your question. Did you have any other question for Dr. Underwood or for?
Yes, actually, if I may. Did I understand you said improper cooling is more than likely the culprit? Regardless of the suspect food, it was the improper cooling of food?
I mean, we really don't know for sure. We don't know who. I mean, our suspicion is that it's one turkey. If you take 800 people and 30 turkeys, you get about something in the range of 20, 25, 28 people would be fed by one turkey. And
right.
The people that got sick all kind of ate at a similar time period, or the food was taken at a similar time period during that whole time they were open and doing the volunteer thing. So that's my own suspicion. We do not come to an absolute understanding, but that's my hypothesis, if you will. And then if it's one turkey, my suspicion is, again, that knowing my own situation during Thanksgiving and my amount of space I have in my kitchen to just do one turkey, now I'm preparing one for my family and one for the church volunteer organization, you know, it might be that the turkey was not properly cooled. This is all hypothesis, though.
Thank you for being with us, and thank you for your question. All right, as I said, we will have to bring this to a close. The wonderful thing about knowledge exchanges is they are 30 to 35 minutes. We want to be able to give you guys a great program in a short amount of time so you can get back to your work. I want to thank Susan and Marilyn of Contra Costa Public Health, and to you, our participants on the call today. It's important information to share, and it definitely informs our consumer education work. Our next event will be August 17th, and that's being done with the Food Marketing Institute on promoting food safety and family meals. Again, providing you with some great resources for your September programming. So that's August 17th, and we will be sending out several email reminders about that. That will be a webinar, and we'll be driving you to some great resources for promoting food safety and promoting the concept of people eating meals at home and the benefits of that. As a follow-up to this event, again, I'll be sending out a notice when the recording is posted, and also some links to the kind of publications and information that this case brings up about cooking for large groups, community events, volunteers, cooking food and serving food at events. I'd also like to suggest that everyone who's on the call today may share this information once you receive it with a colleague, and urge them, to listen to this, because I think the case itself points to some important work we all need to do on this issue. The Partnership for Food Safety Education thanks our financial supporters who help make these events for BAC fighters possible: the FMI Foundation, Ecolab, Produce Marketing Association, Sealed Air de Versailles, Walmart, Cargill, and the Foundation for Meat and Poultry Research and Education, and General Mills. My name again is Shelley Feist. I'm Executive Director of the Partnership for Food Safety Education. We want to create events and programming that helps you. So please, if you ever have comments for us, send email to info@fightback.org. And thanks again to our speakers and to all of you for being with us today. I appreciate very much your interest and support. Bye-bye.